Welcome to the Battery Testing Mentor podcast, a podcast about battery testing, battery validation, checking requirements that the battery should meet, and also making sure that batteries fulfill their market entry requirements. Today, we are again kind of just in between us after the interviews of the last two sessions. So I am looking forward to dive into another topic together with you. Today it will be the ISO 17025. Those people who know it know it's a super dry topic, so those who don't know it, they will know it later on. But before we do it, we go into this, just another reminder, if you want to get the summaries, just sign up on www.batterytestingmentor.com and get there the email update so that you get the summaries of the podcast episodes into your inbox. So let's dive into ISO 17025. What is that? I mean, it's a standard, an international standard. You might recognize the ISO, the International Standards Organization abbreviation. And then 17025 is kind of the number of the standard. I mean, so far, nothing surprising. But the question is, what is inside this? And this ISO 17025 is very important for all all testing generally. Like whenever you do testing and you want to really make sure that you are kind of traceable, you make tests that are repeatable, you have basically good quality testing, you will enter or stumble upon this ISO 17025 and need to implement it into your lab. There are other like ISO standards as well, like ISO 9001 is such a very famous one that also sometimes gets raised, and people say, okay, with my battery testing lab, I need to fulfill ISO 9001. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but ISO 9001 is more for production processes. Like when you really produce something, you could say, okay, in the battery testing lab, you produce data. And if you have like a sophisticated lab, you really produce it in a serious production. But typically there is a little bit different focus, because for the battery testing, you really need to make sure that everything is repeatable, that you make sure that if somebody else sets up the same test in some other location, the results are the same. Like if you have production, it's a little bit different. It's more about making sure that the production is according to the quality. But kind of if somebody else, another company sets up a production line somewhere else, it's not you're responsible for them to meet your specifications. But for battery test labs, it is important because kind of these tests are used to for example, prove that you are in compliance with some government regulations, or you might want to prove that you are in compliance with the specifications discussed with your supplier or with your client. And then you really want to make sure what this test lab is doing is accurate and you can rely on this. And therefore, this ISO 17025 was introduced long time ago, and basically now test lab after test lab is kind of working according to the standard. What are the key components of this? That is an important thing that we look into, maybe before we go into the different chapters, to sum up this high level view. So you really, it's all about repeatability, traceability. It is about making sure that you can trust your lab. And basically, this is the core point of this ISO 17025. If you have it, then it is kind of the sign to your clients, to other like companies out there, that they can rely on your measurement data, on your result from tests. And therefore, it is important to really, make sure you are in compliance with it and don't take it too lighthearted. It is also important to notice that basically there are checks, there are like you need to be accredited, and then the auditors come and they can be extremely picky. And very detail oriented, and they will check every kind of letter in your documents to make sure that you are kind of along the ISO 17025 and not kind of falling out, and there are gaps that lead to unreliable results. Let's go into the details. What is part of this ISO 17025? So basically, it lists a lot of requirements. There are requirements for the resources that you use, that is like equipment, is the personnel, is the facilities, like is the surrounding, like what are the environmental conditions. There are requirements regarding the process, like how do you perform the test, like how do you work on the contracts, what is like the contract checkings, for example, or check that you can really perform what you are offering to the client. There are procedures regarding verification and validation of the test methods you're using, of the measurement, like there is this requirement for making sure your test equipment, the measurement equipment, is calibrated. There are requirements regarding how to sample, how to handle the test equipment, the calibration items. There are requirements regarding technical records, measurement uncertainty, like all these things. And then leading into reporting, of course, as well. I mean, reporting is really important, that kind of everything is documented in the way it should be, like that another lab can look at it and repeat the test, kind of to achieve this repeatability. And then there are a lot of general requirements for like reports, calibration certificates, statements of conformity. Really, like you can go very, very deep. That is maybe on the other hand also the in some way issue, that you can go very deep and you have to go very deep, but this ISO 17025 doesn't define it in this depth. Like it kind of gives you the requirement, you need to take care of it, but how you take care of it, it's up to you. And that kind of, yeah, gives like freedom to set up a system that really fits to your needs, that fits what you want to do in your lab. But on the other hand, you also have the responsibility to still kind of fulfill all these requirements that are defined there, and to really make sure that you kind of make this ISO 17025 in the whole spectrum. What is also super important is kind of how to deal with kind of the point when something goes wrong, because it's very easy to say, okay, yeah, we document everything and it's fine, and everything is calibrated, and then we just need to write in our report, use that equipment, we set it up this way, this was the cell, this was kind of how like it was pre-treated, then the test and the result, and now everything is clear. The key point, the challenge comes when kind of dealing with something that goes not according to plan. Like you have the process, but somebody didn't follow the process, or you have the process, but something like didn't work out according to the process and you had to do adjustments. Maybe the battery also reacted in a way, and that kind of impacted how the test was conducted. And then you can say, okay, now I'm in breach of my kind of procedure, how I wrote the procedure in the beginning. What do I do now? Like, do I say, okay, cancel everything, throw away the test data and start new? And the customer might say, okay, it doesn't work like this. I still want to have a report. And by the way, I need to produce now a new battery that is also like not so easy, will cost money and so on. So you still need to document it in a way that is clear what then happened, despite these kind of deviations. And on the other hand, also take internal steps to make sure to understand what has happened. And was this now a problem of your procedure, of your setups? how to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or kind of at least to understand what was happening. And then you can still decide, can we accept this because there was something going wrong with the sample and you couldn't influence it? Or is there really something like, is the procedure badly written and it's super easy to misunderstand it? Maybe we need to change the procedure. Maybe there is some problem with your test equipment, and the setup of your sensor measures something that is not really accurate. Like, for example, if the temperature sensor in the climate chamber is at a kind of stupid location, it might show you a temperature that the battery never sees. And then, I mean, of course, you can say, okay, it was calibrated, but it was just calibrated that the temperature is at the same point where the measurement sensor, for example, is, that this is accurate, but it was maybe not calibrated that there where the battery is lying, you have this temperature. And then you need to document it, to really make sure that this is not just like talked about somewhere in a meeting and everybody says, oh yeah, we made a conclusion and we know it now. You need to document what you did, what conclusion you made, and how you implement it in the future. And this is kind of the whole part of kind of the measurement systems, management systems, that is also a whole section in the ISO 17025, where it is really about kind of making sure that you have like in control what happens in your lab, and you make sure that, if something goes wrong, you are aware about it and you document it, you talk about it openly, you find the conclusion how to handle this. So the ISO 17025 is a really big procedure. I mean, it's not that big, not so many pages, but it covers a very wide topic. It's important that it gives you a lot of requirements on the way, but it doesn't tell you really how to implement these requirements. This is more up to you then. This is really gives you the freedom, but also the responsibility. And very important is making sure that if something goes wrong, which will always happen in our everyday lives, not everything runs according to plan. You have ways to deal with it, to examine it, to find out what went wrong, and draw the learnings out of this. So if you are struggling with your 17025, let me know. Let's have a discussion about this topic. You can spend way more than this quarter hour here in the podcast talking about this. And with that, I wish you another good 2 weeks and hear you next time.